Welcome back. So what works, what's your experience, and what's the future? That's what the government's review of frontline policing aims to find out. It was announced earlier this year, and this month all officers and staff from chief superintending rank down were invited to give their views. So I'm delighted to welcome the man in charge of it, the Minister of State for Policing and the Fire Service, the Right Honourable Nick Hurd MP. Alongside him, your President, Gavin and Steve Graham, who's a homicide officer seconded to the Home Office for the review, and they're going to discuss with him the findings so far. So please give them a very warm welcome.
Shall I kick off? Kathy, thank you, and on a personal note, congratulations to you for speaking up about what you have spoken up about in recent days. So, colleagues, it's good to be here again. I think I've now been police minister for about 14 months, which means I think I'm the longest serving police minister in modern political history. But my approach was quite straightforward when I started, because I recognised I didn't know a lot about policing. So my policy was to shut up and listen. And so I hit the road and hit the phone and spoke to every single police force in England and Wales last year as part of a demand review that we did. And then since then, I've spent a lot of time listening to officers of all levels, chiefs, PCCs, a lot of time, as Gavin will testify, with your association. And again, I place on record my quite genuine thanks for the time you've given me, but also the very constructive tone, Gavin, that you and Paul and Dan and others have taken with me as we try and think through some of the many problems and challenges that we have to think through together. And through that exercise, I learnt a lot and heard some very clear and some very consistent messages. So yes, I heard a very, very clear message about concern about capacity, stretch, and the ability to do the job properly. I heard a lot, very consistent concern about what that all means for the welfare of officers. I heard a lot of frustration about stuff that irritates and gets in the way, and how time, which is a very, very precious commodity, gets wasted, whether it be crappy IT systems, inefficient processes, the amount of time spent what many feel is doing other people's jobs, the amount of time spent having to deal with processes and demand that doesn't seem to have that much to do with core policing. Okay? So those messages were very clear and, of course, caused me real concern, and I'll come to that. But what I also heard and saw with my own eyes was some incredibly positive solution finding from an organisation and a culture that prides itself on can do. You know, so it's hard not to be very impressed when you go to Avon and Somerset and seeing how they're using data in a really smart way to manage demand as effectively as any force in the system. It's genuinely inspiring to go to Bedfordshire and see what happens when you have some police officers absolutely determined to move the needle on diversity. It's genuinely inspiring to go up to Lincolnshire and see what they're doing in terms of using mobile working to transform the time available for core policing. And I could go on. I've come across the system, brilliant, brilliant examples of modern policing at its best. And the reality is, ladies and gentlemen, you know, we could talk ourselves down, we could get very negative about what's going on, because we are all operating in an extremely challenging environment of change and financial pressure. And that's the reality of the task that we have together. But what I've come off this journey of is a very strong belief, and what encourages me is that sense of positive can-do that still exists in a system that is very, very proud of the job and the service we deliver to the public. And that's what we need to build on. So what have I done with that? So we have, over the last 18 months, changed the way the government and the Home Office work with police. It is much more collaborative. So, for example, we are now going into a critical stage of negotiations with the Treasury about the next spending review. The work we are doing in preparation for that is a collaborative work, and in fact we've got an assistant chief constable seconded into the Home Office to work with our finance team to build the best possible evidence case for that critical bit of work. We have increased capacity, there is more resource in the system. It's never going to be as much as some people want, but we're very limited in terms of what we can do. But there is an additional £460 million of public money in the police system this year, and many forces in this room that I've spoken to are recruiting. The Met are recruiting another 500 officers, Essex 200 odd, Kent 150 odd, Kent 200 odd, Nottingham 100, West Mercia yesterday announcing recruitment of an additional 100 officers. Okay? So there is more capacity and more resource going into the system. There's a lot of investment in the kind of technology that is fundamental to the future of policing in terms of its ability to make the job easier, free up time, deliver a better service to the public. There's a stream of work around the mental health issues that many of you have raised and the frustration around kind of how core policing time is being used, and that management of demand, external and internal, that is frustrating so many of you. That's all real, that's happening. But there's a very important strand of work which we're discussing now, which is around how can we give better support to frontline officers. And I look at this very simply. The most important assets in the police system are human. It's our responsibility to look after our people, but also to do everything we can to get the best out of our people. And we all know there's a lot of change that needs to happen. The whole stream of work in this area, but the frontline review, which we're discussing in this session, is very important to me personally, to the Home Secretary and to the department. Because it is a genuine effort on our part to reach out directly to frontline officers and say, we actually want to know what your experience is, what you think about how you're being supported, and the ideas for change that you can see in front of you. Okay? This is an entirely genuine approach, which Steve will talk to. And it is, in sponsoring this review, I want to achieve two things. I want to build the most complete picture possible using all the sources of research and analysis, surveys that we've got about how police officers feel, about how they're being supported and developed in the very difficult job that you do. Okay? The picture is incomplete. I want a full picture. And then I also want ideas for change from the people who know more about policing than anyone. Because you're bumping up against the problems and the challenges and the frustrations and the irritations every day. I haven't had a single meeting with frontline officers where someone hasn't put on the table an idea. And I want to harvest those. Because the best within the world, the chiefs are not the source of all wisdom in terms of what needs to change. I want to hear from the front line. I'm entirely genuine on that. And I'll close on this. Two aspects of this frontline review is being led by cops. I think 2/3 of the team running this are operational police officers. Second point, this is the first time that the Home Office and the Police Minister has done something like this. This is new ground for us all, okay? So I'd like your help to make it succeed. Because this is an entirely genuine attempt to reach out and hear from the front line. And we are very aware that there's a lot of scepticism out there. We were a bit nervous about the first Twitter session, weren't we, Steve? Thought there'd be a lot of #GrumpyCop. Actually, we got 40,000 people engaged in that conversation, 500 ideas, 450,000 people, impressions in relation to that conversation. So I think there is an appetite out there to engage and to help us do a better job in terms of getting better support, delivering better support for frontline officers. What will be the product? It will be a set of recommendations in the spring to the government and to the police about change that needs to happen, change informed by the opinion of the frontline. That's what the frontline review is about. And I urge you, encourage you to park scepticism and engage and encourage your people to engage, because you are, in this room, big influencers in the system. I know that many people in this room have bigger leadership responsibilities than some chiefs. You are an incredibly important part of how the police system works. We're absolutely serious about wanting to deliver better support for frontline officers. We need our decisions to be better informed by those on the front line. Please help us do that. Thank you.
Gavin, Thomas now, you take it away.
Yeah, I think, as I said yesterday when I opened conference, you have got something really important to say. And I, Paul and Dan, see ministers, we see Home Office officials regularly. But the real power is hearing from operational superintendents. So, and I just want to amplify what the minister just said. I've had numerous conversations about the frontline review. It is, in my judgment, a genuine reach out to the service to understand what's actually happening in there. Looking at leadership, looking at how we're professionally developed, our well-being and our innovation. We only just had a presentation this morning around some fantastic practice in West Midlands. But we all know the frustration around innovation. When we have the discussions, perhaps in the bar tonight, around some great ideas happening in one constabulary, yet why is it not being promulgated across the service to deliver best service, effectively what we're all here for the public? So I think there's a tangible there for me, which I hope will come out to the frontline review. Early doors, which my role here is more around steering it as part of the steering group, steering it, I suppose, injecting a degree of scepticism, on occasions, a degree of reality around where the frontline review is going to go. I think what we are seeing is, there's some really interesting early findings coming out here. And a couple of things for me is around how our people are treated, how our people feel empowered in terms of making those decisions. You have those conversations with your teams every day about some of the ideas they do, but the frustration is, how do you get those ideas, that sense of feeling, back into the service to engender change? Now, the substantive tangible for me is out of this, and I really want to see this, is how does this influence future policy and thinking for government, for policing in the future? But I emphasise enough. We, I think, have an opportunity to engage in this with the frontline review to contribute to it, because I do think we have an important voice on this.
Steve, Greg, tell us about your role with the review and being seconded to the Home Office. How's that work?
Yeah, thanks, Kathy. So I'm leading the engagement strand. I came on board towards the end of June. What I'd be interested in, just a show of hands as to who's heard of the frontline review up to now. That's quite pleasing then, that's good. I wasn't really that aware of it in June when I came on board. 24 years service, been an operational cop all those years, really, really love the job I do and really care about the people I work with. And I came on board and thought, so what is this then? Is it real? The minister's talked about it, scepticism. In the early days of going around talking about the review, there's lots and lots of scepticism as to whether it's real. But I can say, having been in the team for 3 months now, there's a real, genuine desire to hear. And I know there's pressures around pay and numbers. But there's 4 key themes that's being looked at in the review: well-being, leadership, professional development, and innovation. How remiss would it be if we don't take this opportunity to really, really influence, as the first opportunity that's ever been given for frontline in those 4 areas, which we all talk about. I'm sure the agenda that we've got for conference touches on many of them. So I've come on to lead the engagement. Can I just take a few minutes just to talk about what that engagement looks like, if I can do that? Minister's talked about an evidence capture, so there's lots of stuff out there. Surveys from superintendents, staff surveys that have been done. So the team in the Home Office have drawn all that together to make sure that what's already the voice is captured. But it's building on that in 2 ways: 1 digital and 2 face-to-face. Face-to-face being the real bones of the engagement, but digital. Every force has been asked to support us with that. So hopefully forces are reaching out to get ideas on those 4 themes. The college have allowed us to access Polka. So we're making use of the communities that exist on there and making use of Twitter, which I know lots of people make good use of, and the conference are over the course of these 3 days. We Cops, for those that haven't heard of it, is a 1-hour Twitter chat that happens on a Wednesday evening. We did one 2 weeks ago on well-being. That was really well received. Some really good engagement, some really good ideas, and some real passion coming across. Tomorrow night, we're doing one on professional development. So if people want to join in on that, I'd urge you, at WeCops, just go on Twitter for those that got it, have a look at it, feel free to come and join us. Let's build on that, and then there's another 2 sessions over the coming weeks. The face-to-face work is where I think we'll get the real value when we sit down and have some honest face-to-face conversations. That's going to be varied from chief superintendents down. So for yourselves and your voice, Gavin's got us a place on the NEC, got an opportunity to come around all of the district meetings that you're going to sit in on, also tapped into the college to get involved in some of the leadership courses that are running. So an opportunity for superintendents to have a voice about what you think, but you also care about your people. So your people are being given an opportunity through a varied way, but particularly through a number of roadshows around the forces, about 28 sessions, I think, planned, where we're bringing together a whole range of frontline staff so we can have some real conversations about those themes.
Thanks very much. Well, Gavin, I just wanted to get you to pick up on Steve's last point there. Is there anything you want to tell members that they ought to be doing to get involved with this review?
Well, Steve just alluded to the fact that we've got a session on the frontline review at our next National Executive. I wrote to all chairs and secs asking for this to come on the agenda in the next round of district meetings as a start, talking to Home Office officials around maybe setting up some more round tables as well. And exactly the point that Steve's made. Let's do the hash WeCops Twitter, but I think there's nothing like those frank, candid conversations. And Minister, we had a round table a few months ago in Marsham Street with, I think some of the colleagues are here with you. And I think everybody felt that it was, it was very candid. Sometimes, very, very upfront. But, I think I've seen, having done this role now for over 5 years, a tangible change in terms of the reach out and engagement, certainly by the Minister, in terms of genuinely, and I mean that, about trying to hear from you about what your experiences are. And we all know what the experience was in the early days of austerity. There wasn't, how can I put it, an awful lot of engagement in the service. It was more around, this is what's going to happen to you. Now I think the dial's turning a little bit around. We want to talk to you.
Let me get the Minister to respond to that because, given that forces are operationally independent, how are you going to how can you convince people that the Home Office will enact what's being discussed in this review?
Well, it's a good question, Cathy, and the product of this review will be a whole set of recommendations to both the government and the police system. We're all very aware of the challenge of driving change across a very fragmented police system. There's a lot of frustration being expressed in this room in the past, and I expect this conference as well, about how the system works in its fragmented way. There are strengths and weaknesses of that. But I come back to why I hope this review will work, because it will be based on good evidence, and it will reflect the ideas, information, and the wisdom of those serving on the front line. So it will not be change imposed from the Home Office or from a bunch of people that don't know enough about the realities of policing. It will be change that will be collaborative, and it will be bottom up, and therefore I think it's got a better chance of success. There's always a challenge in the police system of driving change across 43 forces. But if there's a clear evidence base about the need for change and the desire for that change from the front line, I think that gives it a better chance of succeeding.
I've got to say there's a bit of scepticism coming through on the app on that very point. Question here, what makes the Minister think that the current Prime Minister will listen to us as an organisation, as this doesn't happen when it comes to the Pay and Remuneration Board? Yeah,
no, I understand the scepticism on that on that point. But Cathy, I come back to the point. We've got to try and put scepticism aside. As Gavin said, I think everyone in this room knows that policing is changing very fast. Demands on the system are changing very fast, and therefore the demands on our officers are changing very fast. What they need in terms of support is changing very fast. And that means we've got to change. And that change has to be informed change by people who know what they're talking about. And that's the offer, that's the opportunity. People are going to be sceptical and say, well, screw them. That's your choice. But it is a genuine opportunity, as Gavin says, to shape an agenda of policy making in an incredibly important area, which is about how we look after our people and how we get the best out of them. And so I encourage you to join in and participate sincerely.
Gavin, you wanted to respond to that?
Yeah, just two quick things. So some examples of, in terms of the role of the steering group, and there's other members of the steering group in here. Ian, standing in the background, Ian Miller from the Special Constabulary is also part of the steering group as well. And so are members of academia, Unison, and Chiefs as well. But the two quick things for me, I think, are first is and the Minister knows this, we've emphasised this, that when you go out and ask frontline cops for this thing, you can't unsay this. So there's going to be an expectation. So, you know, we're treading a very careful line here, the frontline review, in terms of there's going to be an expectation on this. And secondly, the steering group has said, and I think we all agree now, we need to have some quick wins to show some tangibles that this is a genuine reach out to the service to try and do something different about informing policy and change for the future.
Loads of questions coming in on the app, which I'll put to the Minister and the panel in a minute. But any questions from the floor in the room, give me a wave. There's a question down the front here. Thank you.
Matthew Nichols, Hertfordshire Constabulary. First of all, Minister, a thank you, because I was one of those at the roundtable discussion. And it's important to recognise ministers that are listening to Police Voice. My observation is, yeah, OK, great to have a review, but policing is part of a wider ecosystem. And we've already talked about how often we actually deal with crime versus all the other things we deal with. So what part of this review is also going to look at all the other things that impact on us, whether it be health, probation, social services, adult health care? Now, I know that's probably a bit beyond your brief as policing minister, but it's really important to recognise all those other challenges. And actually, if some of those issues were taken away from us, we may well have sufficient resources just to crack on with, let's say, just dealing with crime.
Yeah. Well, Matt, the straight answer to that is that it's not beyond my brief, because anything that impacts on the police system and the ability of our police system to manage demand matters to me. And I said at the top and in our conversations, I'm very, very aware there's a lot of frustration in the system, and Cressida, who's here, has expressed this very clearly about the amount of time police spend doing work that doesn't feel like core policing. And arguably filling in gaps for other agencies. So, as you may or may not know, in response to that, I've written to every single police chief and price crime commissioner and said, give me the evidence about what's happening in your patch. It's all come in. It's pretty good. There are some gaps. We want to close those gaps. And we're looking at the very good practices around the system in terms of how different forces are managing this well, so that we can share that across the system. And then when we got the evidence, we'll embark on a series of conversations with the rest of the system, saying, look, here's the evidence. How do we work through this problem together? I think it's part of what I was trying to labour at the top. You know, we are changing our approach in relation to the police. It's much more collaborative. And when we hear problems, when we've got evidence to support that, you know, we are doing the work to try and work it through. Because I'm absolutely determined to free up as much police capacity as possible, both in terms of additional investment to support more officers, but also to liberate time to focus it on the core policing job.
I'm going to telescope two questions from the app into one, because they cover the same ground. The National Audit Office has said today that the approach to police funding is ineffective and detached from the changing demands faced by officers. It says that the Home Office doesn't know whether policing is financially sustainable, and there's been no forecast as to the impact of losing 44,000 police officers and staff since 2010. Is the review designed to understand this, and what is your view, Minister, on the NAO statement today? Look,
the NAO do a very important job, so I obviously take the review very seriously, Cathy, as you would expect. My candid view is that it's a bit out of date, in the sense that, you know, having led a review of demand and resilience last year personally, and as I said, spoke personally to every single force in England and Wales, I don't need to be told that I don't understand the impacts on the police system, because I've heard it loud and clear from every rank in the system, and more importantly that I've taken some action in terms of getting some more resource into the system to try and help.
So just to clarify, that is an acceptance then that the spending cuts have had an impact on the police force?
It's an acceptance that demand on the police system has risen, has got more complex, and the police are very stretched. And that is a very, very clear message that I received last year, and a message that I acted on with the support of the previous Home Secretary, and the current Home Secretary has made it very clear that he too is very supportive of, as he says, resetting the relationship with the police and making police funding a priority for him. So there is a recognition very clearly from ministers that the system is stretched, and we've taken action, again, within the constraints we've got, because this is a room of pragmatists and realists. You realise that although the economy has improved since 2010, we're not out of the woods, and we're still spending what it is, £50 billion a year on interest alone. So there isn't, we're not, we're still in a situation of restrained resources, but there is an additional £460 million worth of public money going into the police system this year, and many forces in this room are recruiting, and I hope that is welcome. So what I'm saying is that there is a recognition in the Home Office at the ministerial level about the stretch that I talked about and action taken to try and help.
I mean, money coming from central government is 30% down in real terms since 2010. So I'm sure many in the room would accept what you're saying about the extra 460 million, but can you persuade the Prime Minister and the Chancellor that more needs to be done?
Well, we're building an evidence base around what's actually happening on the ground. And as I said, Kathy, at the top, we're doing that in a very collaborative basis. So it is effectively joint working to present an argument to the Treasury. The really critical next part in the budget cycle for policing, which is the comprehensive spending review, and we are, I think, working together, I think for the first time, in presenting a joint case to the system about what the police system needs, based on the evidence, based on the best possible evidence base we can put together. I think that's the first time we've done it, and that's indicative of the kind of new collaborative approach that the Home Secretary and I want to develop with the police system. Because we operate in a very tough environment, we've got to work together.
Any other questions from the floor, or shall I go back to the app? Give me a wave. This is probably your last opportunity. A wave at the back there. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Yes, good morning. Simon Nelson, I'm an association member, and I'm also representing the Disabled Police Association at the conference. And on our behalf, I'd like to say thank you to the President for our invitation here for the first time as well. My question really relates to seeking some reassurance around preserving a diverse workforce, because obviously there are pressures that come from building capacity, but also in the background there's a consultation around capability dismissal, which relates to a high proportion of disabled officers who may face the prospect of being required to resign and then reapply as a member of police staff, or even be dismissed from the service. I'd put it to you that if it related to any other protected group, there would be an outcry, and there hasn't been a proper consideration around equality impact, and I'd be grateful for some further consideration as part of the review. Thank you.
So, don't just feed into the review. Perhaps you can catch me after this so I can get a bit more detail about the issue that you raised. But do make sure that the association and your membership feed into the review on that point.
Great. Well, I think we're pretty much at an end now. Lots more to ask the Minister, but we're run out of time.